Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. 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 Parrot TV.
The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Hi, welcome to World Inkers Network. I am your noble and honest host, Dustin Pickering. Today we have a guest, Dr. Randy Overbeck. He is an award-winning educator, author, speaker, and podcaster. As an educator, he served children for more than 3 decades, and his mind that experience to create captivating fiction, authoring 2 series, the best-selling series, The Haunted Shores Mysteries, and the award-winning series, Lessons in Peril. His novels have won national awards, including Mystery of the Year, Best Book Award, and the Gold Award from Literary Titan, and has amassed hundreds of 5-star reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. Dr. Overbeck also hosts the popular podcast, Great Stories About Great Storytellers, where he reveals the unusual and sometimes strange backstories of famous authors, directors, and poets. He is a speaker in considerable demand, sharing his popular presentations about ghosts, writing, and book publishing with hundreds of audiences all over the world. As a member of the Mystery Writers of America, Dr. Overbeck is an active member of the literary community, contributing to writers' critique groups, serving as a mentor to emerging writers, and participating in writing conferences such as Killer Nashville and the Thriller Fest. When he's not researching, writing, or speaking or podcasting, Randy enjoys traveling with his wife, Kathy, and visiting both his far-flung family and scenic locations, often in search of inspiration for his next great story. Let's welcome Dr. Randy Overbeck to the show. Welcome and thanks for being on the show today. So tell us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Dustin. Glad to join you.
Your new work, the process that went into that, and glad to have you. It's wonderful to see you again, and I'm glad your work is seeing a lot of success. So tell us about your new masterpiece. What is some of the plot line? I don't, not to give away the exact plot, but what kind of suspense are we to expect from this piece?
Well, that's the new book is Red Shadows at Saugatuck. It is the 4th entry in my best-selling Haunted Shore Mystery series, and it is, to be honest with you, Dustin, it has some of the best writing I've ever done. In this entry, wow. The series, of course, revolves around Daryl and Aaron, a couple that meets in the first book, falls in love in the second, is on their honeymoon in the third book, and in this 4th book, which takes place 7 years later, they now have a 5-year-old son named Leo, a very typical, inquisitive, precocious 5-year-old son, who also happens to have inherited his father's ability to see ghosts. So it enabled me to tell a multi-layered story about family, relationships, as well as a really interesting ghost and murder mystery wrapped together. And I think it's the best one yet.
So what do you think makes it your best writing? Is there a criteria you judge?
Well, first of all,
your own writing by, or do you just feel that this is more impactful?
You get better as you continue, and as each book has had good skills, but my skill level continues to rise. That's part of it. The other part of it is that I was able to do things that I didn't do in the earlier books. So in the earlier books, for the most part, there are a few exceptions. Most of them are told from Daryl's POV. In this case, for the very first time, I have Daryl's partner, Aaron, a 30-something-year-old woman, telling part of the story from her perspective. So that for about a third of the book, and that kind of mixes things up, makes the intrigue a little more interesting. And what I especially enjoyed was adding the family element with little Leo. So Leo is, as most 5-year-olds, very inquisitive about the world around him, and he is always asking, "Well, what about this? And how does this work?" And he does understand that he sees ghosts, but unlike his father, he can't always distinguish when he's seeing a ghost as opposed to when he's seeing a person. And that combination leads to some suspense and trouble for the family as they are trying to uh, find justice for this teen. The story revolves around when the Daryl and his family are heading back to join his wider family for a family celebration in Michigan, which is where he's from. And on their way, they encounter a missing poster, which I'm sure all of your viewers have seen. They put these missing posters up in delis and in gas stations. And Leo, who is just barely learning to read, is able to read a little bit of the poster, the missing part, and he gets his dad to help him read the rest. And it turns out it's a missing about a native teen that has gone missing in the area. So young boy, Leo, is very excited about trying to help find this girl who's missing. Dad, we got to help her. And the whole story unravels from there. So it's a really, I think the other reviewers have said it is the best I've ever written. So I think I'm not alone in my own perception, and I think readers will see it the same way. It's only been out about 2 weeks, so it's very new.
Oh, wow. So it's fresh.
Very fresh.
So what defines your style as opposed to other mystery writers?
Well, I think my style is somewhere between a hard-boiled mystery and a cozy. So those kind of are the opposite, polar opposites in the mystery world. Mine is an amateur sleuth mystery. Daryl is not a trained investigator. Daryl is just a teacher who is following the leads that he's mostly stumbling onto in trying to help find justice for a victim that he uncovers. I think what's a little bit different, what distinguishes mine. When I talk to audiences and they ask me that, I say, well, first of all, all of my books, especially the mysteries, are meticulously researched. So each of the books takes place in a different town, none of which I live in. So these are all real towns. The eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, Cape May, Crystal River, Florida, and now Saugatuck, Michigan. But these are all towns that I have discovered, and they have some really intriguing characteristics that I think make for both a great resort and also a great place to set a story. So, and I work really hard to make sure that the details that readers experience, kind of like taking them to this location. That's not something there are almost, I can't think of very many location mystery writers. The Anna Pigeon series by Nevada Barr, who follows a ranger, a park ranger, from park to park across the United States. A little bit of where I got my inspiration. But besides her, there are not really very many any of the mystery writers. It's much more typical to do where they find a location, they invent a location, and then they have multiple mysteries that happen in this small town, or sometimes in the big city. So that's one thing that sets mine apart. The other thing that what I've attempted to do is, of course, mine are all ghost stories. So I have, in fact, I think I've shared with you this, but I'll do it again. So one of the very early reviews called Blood on the Chesapeake, the first one, case murder mystery wrapped in a ghost story, served with a side of romance, set in a beautiful resort location. So all of those pieces go together to create a really enjoyable read uh, for people who pick the book up. And the ghost is a really important part, but my ghost stories are very different than other ghost stories. So the vast majority of ghost stories that people will pick up and read are one of two kinds. They're what I call the Stephen King version,
Mm-hmm.
which is the ghosts are horrific and scary and terrible, and the whole point is to scare you enough to keep you up all night. You know, and there's lots of people who write that. Harlan Coben writes those. Dean Koontz writes that kind of ghosts. Shirley Jackson. Okay. The other side of the spectrum is what I call Casper the Friendly Ghost. And these are usually cozies where the ghost is friendly, and sometimes it's the ghost of my grandmother, you know, and that kind of ghost interacts with the humans and helps solve the mystery. When again, you know, I'm a big researcher. And when I did research into ghosts, met with paranormal investigators, did a lot of on the ground research, I found that neither one of those story tropes have anything to do with reality. There's virtually no evidence of horrible, scary ghosts out there. And there's certainly no evidence of ghosts walking around next to people, whispering in their ear about how to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do with my ghost stories is my ghosts don't do any more than what we have evidence, documented evidence of how ghosts interact with the human world. They don't solve any mystery. They don't tell them. They don't tell Daryl what to do. They simply provide some breadcrumbs that Daryl was able to follow to eventually get to the truth. I think that. Those are some of the things that distinguish my books. One more I would probably mention, because I usually when I'm not speaking for a group, I usually talk about 3 or 4 different things. One has to do with the location, it has to do with the ghost story. The other one is that each of my books, the murder mystery of my book, ends up being entangled with some a major social issue. So in Blood on the Chesapeake, the murder is all about racial justice. It's a lynch. That's no big secret. I'm not getting any way. You learn that when you start to read the description on the back of the book. In the second book, Kate May, Crimson Ink Kate May, Daryl is trying to find justice for a woman that was murdered. And when he does, he stumbles onto a human trafficking case. So the murder and solving the murder leads to revealing this human trafficking ring operating in New Jersey, which happens to be one of the major hubs of human trafficking in the United States. The third book, which takes place in Florida, is about the murder of 2 immigrants. And I'm not sure there's anything more in the news now than immigrants, migrants, and the larger issue is about the abuse of migrant workers, how migrant workers are used and abused in the South. This last one set in Michigan, is something altogether. The murder mystery here ends up being intricately tied to MMIW. That stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. It's an organization that was developed after the time that the novel was set. The novel was set in 2007. This organization started about 10 or 11. But it's about trying to bring awareness to the number of indigenous women who are kidnapped, raped, abused, and murdered. Something that really goes under the radar of most news. So those are the things, and I tell readers they'll get all of those layers when they open up the book and start down a path. And and I don't want to in any way diminish the fun whodunit puzzle. That's all part of readers' enjoyment of my books as well, and readers tell me they enjoy that as very much. But I think all of those are layered. That's not to diminish anybody else's mysteries. I enjoy reading lots of other people's mysteries as well. I just read one by an author by the name of Mary Monin. It takes place in Greece. It's a really interesting mystery writer. So, but when I tell people, and they say, "Well, why should I pick up your book?" Those are the kind, some of the issues.
So you mentioned location. When you're traveling, do you journal and keep details, and or do you use your memory strictly, or how do you manage
Oh
to
no,
create
my
like
memory's
a
not good enough.
environment in your books
I have to
from
keep a
where
lot
you?
of detailed records. So generally, what happens is what has happened in the first four. Okay, is um, the first one was kind of organic. We were in this area. We fell in love with the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, and meaning we here is my wife, as we were enjoying it, I started envisioning how I could set a story there. So that there really wasn't much of any kind of pre-planning. Um, but even there, lots of notes. We went to graveyards, took names down. We went to restaurants, checked out what we met with.
Hmm.
Um, we met with librarians, all of those. With the other locations, we kind of stumbled on. I kind of stumbled on Cape May. Cape May is about 3 hours from the Eastern Shore, and I just fell in love with the town. And then when I found out that it's the most haunted seaport on the Eastern Shore, I'm going, well, that's kind of a perfect match for a ghost story. But the next two were more deliberately planned. So the one in Florida, when it's set in Crystal River, I actually did some pre-research of 4 different locations in Florida. And then we went to go go check out places in all 4 of those locations. And we ended up choosing Crystal River because I thought it represented the kind of story that I wanted to tell. A small town, in this case, it was old Florida. And then with the new book, with Red Shadows of Saugatuck, I did the same thing. I had several towns that I was looking as a possibility. I start with the issue of, well, it has to be a shore town. So it has to be on a lake or on a river or on a bay, or the ocean. Gulf. So I started with that, and then I go from there to look at the history of the town. What do they have to offer? And then, like in the case of Saugatuck, it took us 3 different visits over different times to go to tell enough details to make it feel realistic. And I want to make sure that I give credit to people. So in each of these towns, I befriend librarians, uh, Chamber of Commerce people. In the case of Saugatuck, it was the gal who runs their visitors bureau, a gal by the name of Lisa Mines. And I learned from them really critical details about the town, like what should I include. And then when the book is finished, when the manuscript is finished, before there is a book, it goes back to these people and they read it and let me know where, if any places, I strayed in creating that vision of what the town is like. And they have been incredible. And in this case, Dustin, it was even more complicated because, as I mentioned, the central theme of the book revolved around murdered and missing Indigenous women. And going into this, I knew a little, I didn't know very much about that. So what I did was I set a meeting with the elders of the tribe that I used in the story. The tribe is called the Gun Lake. They're, I'll come up with a minute of which Indian tribe they're with. But the Anglicization is the Gun Lake tribe. If people know about them, they know about them because there's a Gun Lake casino. It didn't exist at the time of the story. It went up in 11 or 12, I think. But I sat down with them to borrow their knowledge. And then again, when the manuscript was finished, I sent them any of the relevant pieces for them to look over to make sure that I had used the right terminology, to make sure that I was sensitive to cultural norms, to make sure that I had represented the issue in a fair and honest way. And their feedback was invaluable to make sure that that my research had yielded the details I wanted that made it accurate. So all of that is part of my process. It is not how I write the story, but all of that I have to do almost before I put the first pen.
So how many revisions and edits do you go through? I mean, per manuscript roughly? Is it like a very tedious process, or is it something that
I think it's
you find joy
personally,
in?
I wouldn't call it tedious. For me, it's not tedious for me. It's more organic, but it is daunting. Um, I have a blog post that I created called 14 First Chapters. I don't think I shared the story with you when we talked earlier, but this is actually a true story. Blood on the Chesapeake. Now remember, this is the first book I've done. When I was working on Blood on the Chesapeake, I actually ended up with 14 different first chapters before I settled on the right first chapter. In some cases, the chapter I had as first started never got used. In other cases, it was moved to someplace later in the novel. Now, my ability to be able to write has improved. I haven't needed to do 14 revisions as I go on. But every chapter is revised multiple times. How many? 4, 5, 6. They're revised multiple times by me.
Mm-hmm.
I have a writers group that I work with. They see the chapters and give me feedback. I have a beta readers group who reads the book and provides feedback back to me. All of those. And then, of course, like I said, Lisa Mize and the elders, Frank and Bud, they gave me feedback, and revisions followed from there. Revisions don't bother me. Editing doesn't bother me. I know there are lots of authors that's like a bad word for me. But I actually, what I see is as I work on a revision of a chapter. Okay? So I'm working on a new book. I've actually spent this morning revising this chapter. What I see is the chapter becoming better, tighter, stronger, more powerful with each revision. And that empowers me. That helps me get on to the next step. Okay, I can do that. Let's do the next one.
So when do you decide when you're actually completed? Like, let's just say a paragraph, for instance. When do you realize, like, this is where I want it to be?
Again, that's a decision that's largely organic. The real problem is, I don't know if any authors have shared this with you. The real problem is you could revise forever. I see things that I published that I could pick up a chapter here in Red Shadows at Saugatuck and look at this paragraph and go, I could have tightened that up a little bit. And I could have taken out 2 more words out of there. So what the question you're asking is a very legit question. I generally kind of know when it's at the point that it's about as good as I could possibly get.
Mm-hmm.
My rule is I don't want to send anything out that isn't my very best work. I shared with you that I think this is the best, at least as some of the best writing I've ever done. But when I wrote this, Blood on the Chesapeake, the first one in the series, so this one was 19. This one came out in 25. This was the very best I could do. I wasn't just throwing words on a page and getting it out there. That's why I took enough time to come up with 14 first chapters before I got to the chapter that I thought, that's it. That's the first chapter. But I didn't have that issue with the other books, because by the time I got it figured, by the time I hit the jackpot with what the first chapter was, I knew how to write the first chapter in every successive novel. I knew how to put the hooks in, the readers immediately pulled into the story. I knew how to drop it up breadcrumbs that's going to make them turn the page to the next one. I knew how to end that chapter so that nobody's going to bed without turning that page. I didn't know that when I first started. I know that. That does not mean that Red Shadows at Saugatuck, that I wrote the first chapter the first time I went through. That never happened. There is never a chapter that I wrote the first time. And that's it. I know there are a few famous authors who claim they can do that, and maybe they can't. I cannot. Wordsmithing does not flow that automatically from me that I can throw words on the page and go, that's it, I got it, I nailed it. Not usually.
Mm-hmm. So I have a title question. Red Shadows. Why Red Shadows?
I will admit something here. I don't think I've admitted on any interview, Dustin. I I don't like to do titles. I'm not really great at titles. I think it's the whole brevity thing. I don't do brevity well. It doesn't make any difference what it is. If it's a blurb, if it's a tagline, that is not something I do well, and it takes a lot of work. Once I had kind of figured out how I wanted to do the series. I wanted the kind of flow in the series. So the first one is blood, the second one is crimson, the third one is scarlet. I'm going, okay, now what do I do here? And I really kind of played around with a bunch of possibilities. I ended up settling on Red Shadow for a couple of reasons. Again, the red echoing the blood aspect of the 4 books. But in this case, it carries another connotation. So one of the things that I learned is that natives being called red, as in redskins, that to them is like the N word for African Americans. It's a very pejorative term. But most Americans, certainly white Americans, don't know that. I didn't know that. So I wanted to kind of touch on that by having red. I tried to figure out, well, how do I put something that kind of indicates about the ghost part, but doesn't really give it away? And what I ended up with was Red Shadow. Of course, it has to be at Saugatuck. So that's kind of how I arrived at the title. To be honest, I'd be thrilled if I had somebody else that would come to me and go, "Oh, here's your title. There you go. Use that one." That dance with joy, because I spend hours trying to figure out. I assume there will be a 5th entry. I'm not there yet. I'm actually working on 2 different literary pursuits, but I'm assuming, and I don't have the faintest idea how I'll come up with another red title. I don't know. There are other red names, we looked at things like Rose. I'm trying to think what the other words we looked at. I don't know. But Red Shadow seems well, I don't have enough readers to say what they don't like. The early critics really liked it.
So what is it that fascinates you about Ghost? Where did that, that curiosity begin?
That's, I didn't, when I was first writing, or that's not fair. When I was first getting my ideas together for Blood on the Chesapeake, the first one, I didn't originally plan for it to be a ghost story. It didn't need to be a ghost story. There's a great story in itself about a lynching that occurred in a town some 30 years earlier, and he has to figure out. What happened was when I was working on the basic outline of that story, the brainstorming that part, I was at a writing conference. The writing conference was in Indiana. It's called the Writing Workshop, and this is a true story. If you've been to any of the conferences, you go in and you go, I want to go to this session, I want to go to this session, I want to go to this session. Well, I had a session picked, and the session was canceled. I think the person got sick. I don't remember. So they weren't there. So I'm going, I'm here. I don't want to waste my time, so I'll go to another session. And there is a session by a paranormal investigator. In fact, the group is in the presentation. It's called the Central Indiana Paranormal Society. And they gave the most intriguing presentation. I was kind of just going in there to kill time. Did I believe in ghosts for that? Yes, but not like, oh wow, okay. Their presentation was so compelling about how they discover ghosts, how they discover whether there's a ghost or not, what strategies they use, what techniques they use, what they had uncovered. And I went, wow, that would be a really interesting little wrinkle in the story. I didn't want to write a ghost story. I didn't want to write it that would be about ghosts. But I thought, well, if the ghost could be a minor part in the narrative, that would add one more layer to it. And as it turns out, I didn't. I wasn't planning this. I didn't. It wasn't a marketing beautiful idea when I had it, but it turns out there's a whole slew of people who have bought my book, not because they're lifelong mystery fans, but because they're lifelong ghost fans. So I'm tapping into the mystery group, mystery audience, as well as the ghost audience, which, from a marketing perspective, is a good idea. And because I tell a ghost story different than what most people are used to, it kind of creates a little niche for me to fit my work in that's different. It won't be like reading something I already read before. Oh, okay.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. You have a podcast that's been going around for some time now. What started that, and why did you decide to do this podcast? And what is it about?
Well, I think podcast, if you do a podcast like you do here, basically your podcast is a work of love, because you don't really get much. I'm not selling books. I'm not,
Right.
So I'm doing it because I love it. And it was an idea. And I've scanned podcasts. I've listened to a bunch of podcasts. I'd never seen anything like this. And I thought, well, nobody else is doing this. So, and to be honest, it actually came out of my experience as a teacher. So when I was teaching high school English, junior and senior high school English, what I discovered was that what the teens loved most was these weird stories about the authors that they've been reading, but they didn't know anything about the background of the person, or like how they got to that Edgar Allan Poe died in a gutter, and all. So, and I thought, well, if teens would be interested in that, I thought others would be interested. So then I started doing research, and what I found is that it doesn't work for every author that I have, but for most of the authors, or directors, or poets, they all have something very unique or unusual or in their background that people don't generally know about. So I get on and talk about the things that they do know. Like Nora Roberts basically invented chick lit, So there are things that I talk about that they know about. And then at the end of the podcast, I hit them with a piece that they had no idea. So I try real hard to choose authors, true storytellers, whose names people will pretty much immediately recognize. I've done authors that are classical, like you studied in school. So like Ernest Hemingway. Right? I do poets. I do one poet a year. And the poets are ones that people really know, like Shel Silverstein, who is the most famous children's poet of the 20th century. I do one director a year as well. I choose directors that will immediately come to mind, like Alfred Hitchcock and Steven Spielberg. And for each of them, I do the same thing. Talk about their success, the awards they won, how they got to that particular point, and then at the end of the podcast, the podcast is really short. They're only 10, 11, 12 minutes long. So in the last minute or so, and I do the book, stuff people didn't like. This is what they didn't teach you about Ernest Hemingway. If you learned about it. Those, I'm now in my fourth year. It's been very popular, been growing in popularity every year. Um, it takes a lot of work. I mean, to research takes hours and hours of research, as you would probably know, to produce a 10-minute podcast. Because I want to make sure I got the details that right and to have things lined up in a way that's intriguing, that's worth listening to. You know, I talk about John Grisham, his origin story. Talk about James Patterson, the most published author in the United States, and how it took him 18 years to go from nothing to what I think it was the overnight success. I talk about, let's give you another, Agatha Christie. Well, Agatha Christie, whom everybody knows, but one of the things they don't know about is that there is almost a murder mystery involving Agatha Christie in her life, that an actual murder that took place that affected her. So all of those kinds of things. And how long will I do this? I'm doing it if I have great names, and I try to spread out so there'll always be women that they don't like women's stories. There's always science fiction, fantasy, somebody in that realm. There's always mystery. There's I try to have a thriller involved, a thriller author involved. There's always at least one classical writer in the month. The one in December usually has some kind of connection to Christmas. So those are the kinds of things, like the Dr. Seuss and the Grinch that stole Christmas. The story behind all that. I think listeners find it fun, easy listen. They're surprised by what they didn't know about the famous murder mystery writer, who the reason she got started in writing murder mystery is because she and her husband were going through a really nasty, horrible divorce, child custody battle, and she literally lay up at night figuring out ways to murder him. And because she wasn't able to actually commit murder, she ended up using what she really seriously thought about doing him in to create a murder mystery that became A.S. Sue Grafton. So those are the kind of things that when people tune in, they'll end up they'll hear new stuff. What I tell them is I tell them about famous people and I tell you what you don't.
So, in conclusion, what would you like to say to the audience, and what kind of shout outs or thank yous would you like to give out?
Well, the list for shout outs are way too long, but I'll try to do a few. I am eternally grateful to all of the people in all the towns that I work with who continue to be my friends and who have made it possible for me to write about their area in a way that reflects positively on the town and also is an accurate representation. I'm super grateful for my writers group. I am absolutely certain, Dustin, that my writing would not be as good as it is if I didn't have really committed, talented, dedicated other writers reading and critiquing my work week by week. In fact, that is the first advice I give any new writer. Find a really good, strong writer group. Doesn't have to be very large, 4 or 5 people, 4, 5, 6 people. I certainly would want to make sure that those people are recognized. My beta readers, I do something not a lot of other writers do. I have about a dozen beta readers that read my book in progress. So they read like the first third, then they read 2/3, and then they read the whole book. And they give me feedback in terms of what's working, what's not working. I give them a set of questions that they have to tell me this character is coming off okay, things like that. So again, writing is not really a solo operation, at least not for me. This is not me sitting in my office typing away on my computer keyboard, inventing. Yes, I do that, but that's only one small part of the picture. If people are interested and want to know more about either the podcast or my books, the best way is simply to check out my website, which is simply authorrandyoverbeck.com. Wherever they go, they can. You don't even have to listen to podcasts. You can go on the website, and all of the episodes are there. You just click on it and it'll automatically play. I was actually on there earlier today doing some research for a presentation I'm doing tomorrow. And the same thing, if you go there and go to my website and go to books, you'll find my new book, there's one link underneath there to take you to any place that you buy books. All of my books are available except for Red Shadow on print, ebook, and audio. Red Shadows will be available on audio in a couple of months. I didn't know this. It takes several months to get it from the printed copy or the e-copy to the audio. We're working on that.
Well, thanks for being on the show, and it was pleasant talking with you, and good luck with the book, and keep promoting, and I hope people will view your or listen to your podcast and then have a good, healthy listen to the stories you tell on the podcast. And we'll see you again on your next book, I'm sure. So thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Dustin. I always enjoy talking with you, and tonight was no exception. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. You've been watching World Inkers Network, and I am Dustin Pickering. If you want to be in touch with me, to either submit to our publication at worldinkers.com or to be on the show, please write to me at publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. We will be in touch with you guys about the who's who in creative writing pretty soon here. And so please keep an eye out. And I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful evening, and get to writing. Thank you so much for viewing.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV.